have to chip away at her, removing strategic slivers here and there until her objections finally collapsed. That would require patience, attention, time. So be it. She was worth all of that and more. Arriving at the door of Catherine's suite, Leo knocked discreetly and waited. She appeared promptly, opening the door and smiling at him. "Good morning," she said with an expectant glance. Any words of greeting Leo had intended to say vanished instantly. His gaze traveled slowly over her. She was like one of the exquisite feminine images painted on bandboxes or displayed in print shops. The pristine perfection of her made him long to unwrap her, like a bonbon done up in a neat paper twist. Leo's silence went on so long that Catherine was forced to speak again. "I'm ready for the outing. Where are we going?" "I can't remember," Leo said, still staring. He moved forward as if to crowd her back into the room. Holding her ground, Catherine placed a gloved hand on his chest. "I'm afraid I can't allow you inside, my lord. It wouldn't be proper. And I do hope that for this outing you have hired an open carriage instead of a closed one. We can take a carriage if you prefer. But our destination is a short distance, and the walk is pleasant, through St. James's Park. Would you like to go on foot?" She nodded immediately. As they left the hotel, Leo took the side nearest the curb. Walking with her hand tucked into the crook of Leo's arm, Catherine told him what she and Beatrix had read concerning the park, that King James had kept a collection of animals there, including camels, crocodiles, and an elephant, as well as a row of aviaries along what became Birdcage Walk. That led to Leo telling her about the architect John Nash, who had designed the central mall through the park. The avenue had become the royal ceremonial route from Buckingham Palace. Nash was what they called a coxcomb back then, Leo said. Arrogant and self-important, which are requirements for an architect of that caliber. "Are they?" Catherine seemed amused. "Why, my lord. The staggering amount of money expended on an important work, and the public nature of it, it's effrontery, really, to believe that a design in one's head has enough merit to be built on a large scale. A painting hangs in a museum where people have to seek it out, or avoid it if they prefer. But there's not much one can do to avoid a building, and God help us all if it's an eyesore." She glanced at him astutely, paying close attention. "Do you ever dream of designing a grand public palace or monument, as Mr. Nash did?" "No, I have no ambitions to be a great architect. Only a useful one. I like designing smaller projects, such as the tenant houses on the estate. They're no less important than a palace, in my opinion." He shortened his stride to match hers, and steered her carefully over a rough patch in the pavement. "When I went back to France the second time, I happened to encounter one of my professors from the Académie des Beaux-Arts, while I was on a walk in Provence. Lovely old man. What a fortunate coincidence." "Fate. You believe in fate?" Leo gave her a crooked grin. "Impossible not to, living with Rohan and Maripin, don't you think?" Catherine smiled back, and shook her head. "I'm a skeptic. I believe fate is who we are and what we make of our chances. Go on, tell me about the professor." "I visited Professor Joseph often after that chance meeting, drawing and drafting and studying in his atelier." He pronounced the surname the French way, with the stress on the second syllable. Pausing, he smiled in rueful reminiscence. "We often talked over glasses of chartreuse. I couldn't abide the stuff." "What did you talk about?" came the soft question. "Usually architecture." Professor Joseph had a pure view of it, that a small, perfectly designed cottage has as much value as a grand public edifice. And he spoke of things he'd never mentioned at the Académie, his sense of the connections between the physical and spiritual, that a perfect man-made creation, such as a painting, sculpture, or a building, could provide you with a moment of transcendence. Clarity. A key to unlock a glimpse of heaven. Leo paused as he glimpsed her troubled expression. "I've bored you. Forgive me." "No, it's not that at all." They walked in silence for nearly a half-minute before Catherine burst out, "I've never really known you. You're overturning so much of what I assumed about you. It's very disconcerting. Does that mean you're softening toward the idea of marrying me? Not at all, she said, and he grinned. You will, he said. You can't resist my charms forever. He guided her away from the park and onto a prosperous street of shops and businesses. Are you taking me to a haberdashery? Catherine asked, viewing the windows and signs. A flower shop? A bookshop? Here, Leo said, stopping in front of a window. What do you think of this place? She squinted at the printed sign hung inside the window. Telescopes? She asked in bewilderment. You want me to take up astronomy? Leo turned her back to the window. Continue reading. Purveyors of camp, racecourse, opera, and perspective glasses, she read aloud, by Her Majesty's Royal Letters Patent. Illuminated ocular examinations performed by Dr. Henry Schaefer with modern devices for the purpose of scientific correction of vision acuity. Dr. Schaefer is the finest oculist in London, Leo said. Some say in the world. He was a professor of astronomy at Trinity, when his work with lenses led him to an interest in the human eye. He was habilitated as an ophthalmologist, and has made remarkable strides in the field. I made an appointment for you to see him. But I don't need the finest oculist in London, she protested, puzzled that Leo would have gone to such lengths. Come, Marks, he said, drawing her to the door. It's time for you to have proper spectacles. The interior of the shop was intriguing, lined with shelves of telescopes, magnifying glasses, binoculars, stereoscope instruments, and all manner of eyeglasses. A pleasant young clerk greeted them and went to fetch Dr. Schaefer. The doctor came out very soon, displaying an expansive and jovial temperament. A handsome set of white whiskers framed his pink cheeks, and a thick snowy mustache curved upward when he smiled. Schaefer showed them around his shop, pausing to demonstrate a stereoscope and explain how the illusion of depth was created. This instrument serves two purposes, the doctor said, his eyes twinkling behind his own spectacle lenses. First, the stereogram cards are sometimes of use in treating focusing disorders in certain patients. And second, they are helpful in entertaining high-spirited children. Catherine was cautious but willing as she and Leo followed Dr. Schaefer to the rooms at the back of his shop. Whenever she had purchased spectacles in the past, the optician had simply brought out a tray of lenses, handed her various ones to hold up to her eyes, and when she felt she had obtained sufficient vision, he had proceeded to make spectacles for her. Dr. Schaefer, however, insisted on examining her eyes with a lens he called a corneal loupe, after putting drops into her eyes to dilate the pupils. After pronouncing that there were no signs of disease or degeneration, he asked her to read letters and numbers from a series of 3 charts on the wall. She was obliged to reread the charts with various strengths of lenses, until finally they achieved a near miraculous clarity. When it came time to discuss the frames for the lenses, Leo surprised both Catherine and Dr. Schaefer by taking an active part. The spectacles that Miss Marks wears at present, Leo said, leave a mark at the bridge of her nose. The contour of the support arch must be adjusted, the doctor said. Undoubtedly. Leo withdrew a slip of paper from the pocket of his coat and placed it on the table. However, I have a few more ideas. What if the bridge is built up to hold the lenses a bit farther away from her face? You're thinking of a design similar to the clips of a pince-nez? Schaefer asked thoughtfully. Yes, they would fit more comfortably and also stay in place. Schaefer stared closely at the sketch Leo had given him. You've drawn curved earpieces, I see. An unusual feature. The intention is to hold the spectacles more firmly onto her face. This is a problem, keeping them on? Without question, Leo replied. This is a very active woman. Chasing animals, falling through rooftops, stacking rock, all an average day for her. My lord, Catherine said in reproof. Schaefer smiled as he examined the contorted shapes of her spectacles. From the condition of these frames, Miss Marks, one could almost believe Lord Ramsay's claims. His mustache curved upward. With your permission, I will instruct the jeweler I work with to build the frames you've drawn. Make them in silver, Leo said. He paused, regarding Catherine with a faint smile. And have him put a touch of filigree on the earpieces. Nothing vulgar, keep it delicate. Catherine shook her head immediately. Such adornment is expensive and unnecessary. Do it nevertheless, Leo said to the doctor, his gaze still holding Catherine's. Your face deserves adornment. I would hardly put a masterpiece in an ordinary frame, would I? She sent him a reproving glance. She neither liked nor trusted such outrageous flattery, nor did she intend to melt at his charm. But Leo gave her an unrepentant grin. And as he sat there and surveyed her with wicked blue eyes, she felt a painfully sweet contraction of her heart, followed by the sensation of being knocked off balance. Such a long distance to fall, and yet she couldn't seem to back away from the danger. She could only stay there with her precarious equilibrium, suspended in longing and peril, unable to save herself. It has been confirmed by Mr. Harry Rutledge, the London hotelier, that a woman identified as Miss Catherine Marks is in fact a half-sister who has heretofore lived in relative obscurity as a companion to the family of Viscount Ramsay of Hampshire. Upon inquiry as to why the young woman was not previously brought out into society, Mr. Rutledge explained the discretion as appropriate to the circumstances of her birth, as the natural child of Mr. Rutledge's mother and an unnamed gentleman. Mr. Rutledge proceeded to emphasize the decorous and refined nature of his sister, and his own pride in acknowledging kinship with the woman he describes as estimable in every regard. How very flattering, Catherine said lightly, setting down the copy of the Times. She sent Harry a rueful glance across the breakfast table. And now the questions will begin. I'll deal with the questions, Harry said. All you have to do is behave in the aforementioned decorous and refined manner when Poppy and I take you to the theatre. When are we going to the theatre? Poppy asked, popping a last bite of honey-soaked crumpet into her mouth. Tomorrow evening, if that pleases you. Catherine nodded, trying not to look troubled by the prospect. People would stare, and whisper. Part of her shrank at the idea of being on display. On the other hand, it was a play, which meant the audience's attention would focus mainly on the activity within the proscenium. Shall we invite Leo? Poppy asked. She and Harry both looked at Catherine. She hitched her shoulders in an unconcerned shrug, although she suspected it didn't deceive either of them. Would you have any objection? Harry asked her. No, of course not. He is Poppy's brother, and my former employer. And possibly your fiancé, Harry murmured. Catherine looked at him quickly. I haven't accepted his proposal. You are considering it, however, aren't you? Her heart gave a few thick beats in her chest. I'm not sure. Cat, I don't mean to harass you about this, but how long do you intend to wait before giving Ramsay an answer? Not long. Cat frowned into her tea. If there's any hope of retaining Ramsay House, Lord Ramsay will have to marry someone soon. A tap at the door heralded the entrance of Harry's right-hand man, Jake Valentine. He brought Harry a stack of Daily Manager's reports, as well as a handful of letters. One of these was addressed to Poppy, who received it with a warm smile. Thank you, Mr. Valentine. Mrs. Rutledge, he said with an answering smile, bowing before he left. He looked the tiniest bit smitten with Poppy, which Catherine couldn't blame him for in the least. Poppy broke the seal and read the letter, her fine brows inching higher and higher as she neared the conclusion. My goodness, this is odd. Harry and Catherine both looked at her questioningly. It's from Lady Fitzwalter, with whom I am acquainted through some charity work. She asks me in this letter, very earnestly, if I will prevail on my brother to call upon Miss Darvine and Countess Ramsay, who are in town. And she provides the address of the house they have let. Not so very odd, Catherine said pragmatically, although the news caused a stir of anxiety. After all, a lady may never call on a man for any reason, and therefore it is certainly not unheard of for one to prevail upon a mutual acquaintance to arrange the meeting. Yes, but why does Miss Darvine wish to speak to Leo? It might be about the copyhold clause, Harry said, looking interested. Perhaps she wishes to offer some manner of concession. I'm sure she means to offer him something, Catherine said sullenly. She couldn't help remembering how beautiful the dark-haired Miss Darwin was, and what a striking couple she and Leo had made as they had waltzed. However, I doubt she intends to discuss legalities. It's something personal. Otherwise she would allow the solicitors to deal with it. Cam and Maripin were terrified by Miss Darvine, Poppy told Harry with a grin. Amelia wrote that her ball gown was trimmed with peacock feathers, which the Rom view as an omen of danger. In some Hindu sects, Harry said, the peacock scries are associated with the rainy season, and therefore, fertility. Danger or fertility? Poppy asked dryly. Well, it should be interesting to see which one Miss Darvine will evince. I don't want to, Leo said immediately upon being informed of the necessity of calling on Miss Darvine. That doesn't matter, you have no choice, Poppy said, taking his coat as he entered the apartment. Seeing Catherine seated in the parlor with Dodger in her lap, Leo came to her. Good afternoon, he said, reaching for Catherine's hand and brushing a kiss on the backs of her fingers. The feel of his lips, so warm and soft against her skin, caused a quick indrawn breath. May I? He asked, glancing at the place on the settee beside her. Yes, of course. After Poppy was seated in a chair by the hearth, Leo sat beside Catherine. She smoothed Dodger's fur repeatedly, but he didn't move. A sleeping ferret was so limp and impossible to awaken that one might have reasonably assumed he was dead. One could pick him up, even shake him, and he would slumber on undisturbed. Leo reached over to toy with the ferret's tiny arms and legs, lifting them gently and letting them drop back into her lap. They both chuckled as Dodger remained unconscious. Catherine detected an unusual fragrance about Leo, a scent of feed and hay and some pungent animal scent. She sniffed curiously. You smell a bit like horses. Did you go for a ride this morning? It's so zoo, Leo informed her, his eyes twinkling. I went for a meeting with the secretary of the Zoological Society of London, and we toured the newest pavilion. Whatever for? Catherine asked. An old acquaintance of mine, with whom I apprenticed for Roland Temple, has been commissioned at the Queen's behest to design a gorilla enclosure at a zoo. They keep them in small cages, which is nothing short of cruelty. When my friend complained to me about the difficulty of designing a sufficiently large and safe enclosure without costing a fortune, I suggested that he dig a moat. A moat? Poppy echoed. Leo smiled. Gorillas won't cross deep water. How did you know that, my lord? Catherine asked in amusement. Beatrix? Naturally. He looked truthful. And now after my suggestion, it seems I've been recruited as a consultant. At least if your new clients complain, Catherine told him, you won't understand what they're saying. Leo smothered a laugh. Obviously you haven't seen what gorillas fling when they're displeased. His mouth twisted. All the same, I'd rather spend my time with primates than pay a call to Miss